everyone, and our first-time listeners. It's so good to see you guys here today. Ooh, I spotted some chips over here. I love a good chip. That's terrible. That's so bland.
It sounds like there's something missing from these chips. Would anyone like to give them a try? Caleb, would you like to try and tell us what's wrong with these chips? Zach, you can have a chip as well. Is there anything wrong with them?
I think they're pretty cold.
You think they're pretty, beyond being cold? Anyone else want to have a try? They're dry, they're cold. There's a lot of bad things about these chips, but are they missing a crucial ingredient? Well, any guesses for what they might be missing that would make a chip bland and tasteless? Salt, that's right, they are missing salt.
So today we're going to be looking at our passage that was read out for us in Matthew 5, and we're going to see what Jesus was talking about. But before we dive right into the passage, this bright and salty passage, can you set the scene for us, Oliver?
Of course. So we're here at the Sermon on the Mount. So think of the most iconic speech you can. Maybe it's I Have a Dream. Maybe it's the apology to the stolen generation. If you're a bit younger, it might be something from the Minecraft movie. Take that moment and times it by 1,000. That's how important this speech is. People are coming from all around the country to hear. There's people from Jerusalem, people from Galilee, and people from Judea. And they're all wondering, what is Jesus going to talk about? And today we're going to look at one specific section, which is called the salt and light verses, which we just had read out for us. And we're going to find that we're called to do two things. We're called to be the light of the world, and we're also called to be the salt of the earth. And so today we're going to explore what exactly that means and how we can make our light shine in our everyday lives. So let's look at the passage. Verse 13, it opens pretty strongly. You are the salt of the earth. What is Jesus talking about here, Lauren?
Now, Jesus isn't calling us a salty snack like hot chips or pretzels. There's a little bit more to that. So, salt has many purposes back in the Middle East during this time. So, salt was used to preserve meats and other foods because they didn't have fridges back then. Salt is also used to enhance flavors.
Yes, anyone who's ever had a roast that's lacking in a bit of salt or likes a bit of chicken salt on their chips can tell you how important salt is to enhance those flavors. And so we've got two uses for salt, preserving and enhancing. And so we have to behave a little bit like this. So when we look at salt preserving food, we're also called to preserve the world. So this means we need to look after creation. And just like salt enhances the flavor of food, we need to enhance the flavor of the world. And so this is through our actions and our influence upon the world. Jesus actually gives us a really helpful example earlier in the Sermon on the Mount of how we can both enhance and preserve the world. And that's by being peacemakers. So by bringing peace, we can both preserve the world and enhance it.
So, salt was incredibly valuable for the time. So, fun fact, during Rome, salt was sometimes used as a currency. So, when Jesus was saying the Sermon on the Mount, he was saying these parables, the people knew that salt had a very specific purpose, and it was very valuable to be able to preserve and enhance the flavors of Christ. So, we know that salt has a very specific job to do, but what happens when salt doesn't do its job?
Well, we see in verse 13, Jesus actually says that the salt loses its saltiness. But to the chemistry students in the room, you'll know that salt is a very stable compound, so it can't actually become less salty. So what is Jesus on about here?
So, have a look at this salt shaker. It has salt in it, which is good and useful, but if we don't do anything with this salt, then it is not fulfilling its purpose, like putting it over these chips. Jesus isn't talking about salt losing its saltiness, like Oliver said. It's about highlighting the fact that the existence of saltless salt is pointless. So just like we know that salt has a very specific job to do, like bring flavor to chips, so you and I have a specific purpose. Without a purpose, we are like saltless salt. So what could this purpose be?
Well, as Christians, we're called to do two things. The first is to love God, and the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. And so this is at the core of our purpose. If we don't do this, we become like the saltless salt. We're completely pointless. We're completely purposeless. And when we're purposeless, we're unable to help others experience God. And so we can see that how we behave and act towards others is essential for us fulfilling our purpose.
Oh, What happened to the lights? That's okay. I have a candle.
Very good.
We'll light the room up. Here we go. We'll turn the candle on. That's a good start. There you go.
Lauren, what are you doing? The light under the bowl is useless. It's not lighting anything up. I think you should put it on a stand instead.
That's a good idea.
Isn't it great we can see now? It's fantastic, isn't it? When there are obstacles in our lives, like fear or jealousy, just like the bowl in front of the candle, it prevents our light shining out effectively. And so we need to observe and find out what those obstacles are so we can best remove them.
Well, I'm glad we sorted that out, and I'm glad we fixed that, Oliver. So now we're going to go back to the show, and we're going to go back to verse 14, where it says that we are the light of the world. So last time I checked, I'm not a glow stick. So what is Jesus talking about here?
Well, there's no points for guessing this, but Jesus is not speaking literally here. Instead, he's talking about a light that is essential to life. So when we look at regular light, we can see that it's both a tool. It powers our solar panels, it helps plants grow, and it gives us vitamin D. And unless you're a vampire who's going to turn to dust, it's also essential to life. Pause for laughter. And then we can also look at artificial light. And this can stop us walking into walls while we're searching for that midnight snack, as I know my father is prone to do. And also, it has some other potentially useful side effects, like on a lighthouse to guide ships away from rocks. And so, in Jesus' day, they wouldn't have had these nice lights we have, but they would have had lamps and fire, and they would have served pretty much the same purpose, to light the house and enable you to work late into the night. So this is what Jesus wants us to think about. But what is the application here, Lauren?
Well, Jesus is using practical examples to help his viewers and his listeners to understand what's happening here. It says to be like this kind of light. So you spoke about how a lighthouse, it stops ships from hitting these rocks. So we are to do it in the same way. We are to guide people in this world to keep them safe. We are to help people along the safe path. Just like we need a physical light around us to light up around us, we need a physical light in our lives. We also need a spiritual light to live out our spiritual lives. This spiritual light doesn't come from a light bulb or a torch. It comes from the Holy Spirit within us. So here we are called to be a source of spiritual light to the world around us, lighting up a path for others.
So it seems we have a clear job here. We have to let our light shine out. But being a bright light can be a bit scary because a bright light can attract attention. It might involve you acting differently to those around you, and that can be a bit intimidating. But we can see in verse 16 that it's our duty to shine out. Despite the difficulties and despite the hardship, we need to let our light shine. And we need to guide others the same way that Jesus guided us. What exactly is this guidance I'm speaking of? Well, let's go back to that idea of a lighthouse. So the lighthouse doesn't just shine over the horizon without purpose. It uses a series of mechanisms and lenses to focus the light into a beam, which then points out, shining for a very specific purpose, to keep ships from hitting the rocks. And so we need to act a little bit like that. We need to focus our light on the purpose at hand. And so this might vary for each person. You might need to focus your light on a specific person or on a specific problem. Or you might need to let your light shine out on a group of people. It's important that we think about what our purpose is and where we need to shine our light. And that's where we trust in God to really help us figure out where we need to be.
Yeah. I can see here in verse 14 and 15 that Jesus takes us on a little bit of a journey. So he starts by saying, we are the light of the world, but then by the end, we finish off as in a little house. What is he talking about here?
Well, Jesus speaks in a way his audience would understand. So if he came to Perth, we might have the parable of the reverse cycle and evap air conditioner. I'm here all week. There's no air cons in Jesus' time, but listeners would understand the importance of lamps, and you might have even been able to see a city on a hill from where he was giving the Sermon on the Mount. And so we've got a little scale model here. It's not quite on top of the hill, but it's near enough. And you can see the city stands out. It's shining, it's bright, it cannot be hidden, and it cannot be hidden from scrutiny. So we need to be like this city on the hill. We need to stand out, and we need to ensure that we can stand up to scrutiny, but that we don't shy away from it. Now, back to the idea of talking at scale. So Jesus starts really big. He starts talking about light of the world, and then he zooms in onto the lamp in the home. And this highlights how light is important at each scale. But the purpose for the light becomes clearer the smaller the scale you're looking at. And it becomes easier for us to understand what the purpose of that light is. So you might not understand what the purpose of the light of the world is, but you might be able to figure out what the purpose of, say, a light switch is.
So light needs to be visible at different scales for it to be useful for us. So even if we've got the light of the world around us and we're in a dark room, we need a lamp to be able to see. So we are created to be that lamp in the dark room. We need to be a light to those around us, like our friends, our family, our co-workers, and we need to bring a light to this wider community, modeling Christ-like behavior and pointing to Jesus.
So Lauren, we've talked a bit about salt and we've talked a little bit about light. What do those two ideas have in common?
Well, at first glance, it doesn't look like there's a lot in common. However, they both rely on the power of the Holy Spirit working to emerge in our lives. So we can see that the Spirit can help us to bring flavor and preservation, shine brightly in the darkness, and to be able to point others towards Jesus. So we read in Psalm 34:8, it says, "Taste and see that the Lord is good." So eating seasoned chips, like Oliver is seasoning the chips now, is a tasty experience. Feeling God's goodness is a bit like tasting those seasoned chips. We can try and describe this, but it is best known when we experience it for ourselves. So I would encourage you all to think about where you can put your trust in God today.
And people can also see the bright light of God's love through our actions and how we treat other people. In verse 16, when we shine bright and when we shine with focus, like that lighthouse guiding the ships, we can help guide others along a godly path. But like any light, we need a source of power, a source of energy. And I have some good news for you guys. We have that source inside of us, in the Holy Spirit. It empowers us and it empowers our actions. And it also grants us the ability to love like God loved us. So Lauren, what's one way you think our listeners can be salt and light in their weeks ahead?
So I would encourage you all to think of one or two people in your lives right now that are in your dark room that you can be a light to. Turn to the person next to you and share one or two ideas that you can be a light to those around you. How can you show the gospel? We want to hear from you and our next generation especially, because this is our next gen service. So we will have Oliver, our roaming reporter, to come around and listen to what our audience has come up with. So I'll give you guys 30 seconds to a minute to be able to think and share with the people around you.
I hope you guys have got good answers, because I probably wanted the two of you.
Okay, and it's over to you, Oliver, and listeners. What are some ideas?
We have our first listener here, Elise. What's one way you can be salt and light?
You can help others and guide people.
What a fantastic answer. Let's move on to someone else. I think I can see Sam Binns. Sam, how can we be salt and light?
By giving people what they need.
Giving people what they need. Fantastic answer. We've got time for one more listener to tune in, and I can see Jared. He looks very excited in the back. Jared, what's one way we can be salt and light in our lives?
Thank you very much for that question. I would do this. No, in all seriousness, I think you can be salt and light in someone's lives by being positive and uplifting and making them feel good about themselves and not putting people down.
So we can see that there are so many ways that we can be the salt of the earth and light of the world. We know that salt and life have very specific purposes. As Christians, Jesus tells us to our purpose in life, which is to love God and to love others. Jesus calls us to be the salt of the earth and light of the world.
We encourage you to take that next step of faith, to not just be called, but to actively be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Remember, you're empowered by the Holy Spirit to act, but you can rely on God to handle the results.
So remember to let your light shine today.